I watched my neighbor's house while he traveled for work. One afternoon, I found police in my yard. "You've been squatting on his property," they said.
My deed was gone.
So was my laptop. He had transferred the title. I disappeared for 10 days. When I returned, I had a lawyer, a drone video, and a plan. This happened last year. I haven't really talked about it publicly, but I think enough time has passed now. I lived in a small 2-bedroom house in Sacramento, California. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I bought it after my divorce. Spent 5 years fixing it up little by little. Replaced the roof myself. Repainted the kitchen cabinets. I even planted a small vegetable garden in the back. My neighbor, let's call him Craig, lived next door in a rental. We weren't best friends, but we got along fine. He'd ask me to water his plants when he traveled for work. Sometimes I'd walk his dog. It was that kind of neighbor relationship where you help each other out and don't ask too many questions. One day, Craig told me he had to fly to Atlanta for a 2-week work trip. He asked me to keep an eye on his place. I said sure, like I always did. A couple of days later, I saw the police walking through my front yard. I figured maybe they were checking in on something, no big deal. But then they knocked. "Sir," one of them said, "we've had a report that you're squatting here." I laughed, thinking it was some mistake. "I own this house." The other officer looked at a clipboard. "According to county records, this house now belongs to a Craig Halpern." My mouth went dry.
No.
That's not possible. I've lived here for 5 years.
They didn't argue.
They just handed me a notice. It was an order to vacate. They told me I had 10 minutes to gather my things or they'd escort me out. I went inside to grab my wallet, my phone, and my laptop. But the laptop was gone. So was the fireproof lockbox I kept in the hall closet, the one with my house deed, my will, my financial papers. I told the officers, "This has to be a mistake." Someone took my documents. They told me I could contest it through the court. But for now, I needed to leave the property.
So I did.
I didn't have a choice. I spent the next 10 days living out of my car. Slept in a Target parking lot the first few nights. I washed up in gas station bathrooms and ate granola bars from a grocery store. I kept thinking, over and over, how did he pull this off? Then it hit me. Craig had stayed over at my place a few weeks before, when his heat went out. He asked to crash on my couch. I remember he was up late, said he was answering emails. My laptop was on the table. The lockbox was in the closet. He had everything he needed. I got in touch with a lawyer. He was young, but he seemed sharp. I told him everything. He looked up the property records. Craig had filed a quitclaim deed, transferring the house into his name. The signature on the form looked like mine, but I never signed it. My lawyer said, "If we can prove the signature's fake and show intent, we can fight this." That's when I remembered the drone. I'd bought it to take overhead shots of my garden. It automatically uploaded footage to the cloud. I logged into the account and went through the saved videos. One of the clips caught him.
Clear as day.
He was standing in my living room. It was the day I was at work. He had gloves on. He went into the closet, pulled out the lockbox, opened my laptop, and sat down. He looked right up at the drone, smiled. I showed the footage to my lawyer. He leaned back in his chair and said, "We've got him." We filed for an injunction and started building a case for fraud. But that wasn't enough for me. I didn't just want my house back. I wanted everyone to know who he really was. The lawyer moved fast. Within a few days, we had a court date for a temporary injunction. That would at least stop Craig from selling the house or moving someone else in. But the bigger case? That would take months. So I went quiet. I stayed at a cheap motel on the edge of town. Spent most of the time watching his place from my car. I know that sounds obsessive, but I needed to see what he was doing. I needed to know if he'd slip up. And eventually he did. One afternoon, he brought a woman to the house. Tall, dressed like she was there for an open house. They stood in the living room for a while, then walked around the backyard. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but she seemed impressed. She kept pointing at the garden. That's when I realized he was trying to sell it. He was going to profit off my life. I called my lawyer. He told me to stay calm, not to confront him. He said the court would handle it, but I was past patience. I uploaded the drone footage to a flash drive, made copies, and started sending them out. To the city's fraud department, to the HOA, to the local real estate agents. I even sent one to a neighborhood Facebook group I used to be in. I didn't put my name on it. I just made sure people saw who Craig really was. Then something strange happened. A week later, I got a call from the police. Not the ones who kicked me out, but a detective. She said she'd seen the footage. Said they were opening an investigation into property fraud. That was the first time I felt any kind of hope. A day after that, Craig posted a long rant on Facebook. Said someone was harassing him, that people were trying to destroy his reputation, that jealous neighbors were spreading lies. But the best part? The woman he brought to the house, turns out she was a real estate agent. She dropped him. Said publicly that she wouldn't represent a seller under investigation. Still, he didn't stop. He started posting fake reviews about me. Made it sound like I was mentally unstable, dangerous, violent. I didn't respond. But I saved everything. Screenshots, timestamps, IP addresses. Then one morning, my lawyer sent me a file. It was a motion from Craig's lawyer, trying to sue me for defamation. That's when I knew he was scared. The defamation lawsuit was a joke, but it still drained me. I was already broke from paying my lawyer, from living out of a motel, from missing work. Now I had to defend myself in another case on top of trying to get my house back. It felt like Craig had found a way to hit me from both ends. First, he stole everything I had. Then, he made me look like the villain. My lawyer handled the legal side. He filed a countersuit, said Craig's claim had no merit. But in the meantime, I kept digging. I found out something that made my blood run cold. Craig had pulled something similar before. It wasn't exactly the same, but close. 5 years earlier, he'd been in a lawsuit with an elderly landlord, an old man with early-stage dementia. The guy claimed Craig manipulated him into signing over a rental property. The case got quietly dropped when the man's family couldn't afford the legal fees. No charges were ever filed. It made me sick. I started wondering how many times Craig had done this. How many people he'd sized up, picked out, and bled dry. I decided to go public. I didn't want fame. I didn't even want sympathy. I just wanted people to know the truth. So, I created a simple website, posted the drone footage, the property transfer forms, screenshots of his Facebook lies. I laid it all out, step by step. No dramatic language, just facts. I called it The House I Lost. I shared the link anonymously in every local group I could find, and it caught fire. People started sharing their own stories about Craig. A former coworker said he was let go from his job after a financial discrepancy. A woman said she rented from him once and lost her deposit after he claimed she caused damage that was already there. Then someone sent me a message. "You're not the first person he's done this to. I have something you need to see." It was a woman named Ray. She'd lived 2 blocks over. Said she dated Craig briefly, years ago. Said he took money from her, promised to invest it, then ghosted her. She had emails, screenshots, a voice message of him admitting he used her. We met in person. I showed her my evidence. She stared at the drone footage for a long time. "Jesus," she said. "He's worse than I thought." My lawyer filed to include her story in our case. Said it showed a pattern of deception, a willingness to exploit people he thought wouldn't fight back. The court date got pushed again. Craig's side claimed they needed more time to prepare. I knew what it really was. He was stalling, buying time, maybe trying to settle quietly. But I wasn't backing down. One morning, about 3 months into this whole mess, I woke up to a loud knock on my motel door. It was 6:30 a.m. I thought maybe it was my lawyer or the police. It was Craig. He was standing there, dressed like he was on his way to church.
Calm, smiling.
"You've made this really difficult for both of us," he said. "Why don't we just talk like neighbors?" I didn't say a word. I just stared at him. "You're not going to win," he said. "Even if you think you will. You'll spend everything. And in the end, nobody's going to care." Then he leaned in and said something I'll never forget. You should have just given me the house when I asked. I shut the door in his face. My hands were shaking, not out of fear, but from how calmly he said it. Like this was just some misunderstanding, like he hadn't been methodically ruining my life. I called my lawyer immediately. He told me to file a restraining order.
We did.
But I knew that wouldn't stop him from trying something else. A week later, I noticed someone had slashed one of my tires in the motel parking lot. 2 days after that, someone tried to access my online bank account. I had to lock down everything, passwords, credit reports, even freeze my credit with all 3 bureaus. I started sleeping with my phone in my hand. Woke up every time a car door slammed in the parking lot. I stopped going out except for court dates. I stopped answering unknown numbers. But then, something shifted. A reporter reached out. Said he'd seen the website. Said he was doing a piece on real estate scams and wanted to talk. I hesitated, but in the end I agreed. We met in a coffee shop across town. I showed him the documents, the video, everything. The story ran 3 days later. Headline: The Neighbor Who Stole a Home. It spread fast. Suddenly, Craig's name was everywhere. The HOA launched a formal investigation. A local nonprofit that helps housing scam victims contacted me and offered legal support. Even people in Craig's own circles, people who used to like him, started backing away. Then came the turning point. We got a court order to depose Craig, force him to answer questions under oath. My lawyer said we'd use it to trap him. We prepared for weeks, went over every document, every timestamp, every little inconsistency. And during the deposition, it happened. He slipped. It was small. He referred to my laptop as his when describing the day he allegedly found it in the house. The court reporter caught it. My lawyer pounced. He asked him to clarify. Craig froze, then backpedaled. But it was too late. That one sentence proved he'd been in my house without permission, and that he had knowledge of items he shouldn't have if his story were true. Our case cracked open. My lawyer filed a motion to invalidate the title transfer and start criminal proceedings for fraud and theft. The DA's office got involved. They called me in to give a statement. But I still didn't feel safe. One night, someone tried to break into the motel room. They didn't get in, but the lock was scratched, and the manager found muddy footprints outside the window. The police wrote a report, but nothing came of it. That was the night I moved again. Quietly. Left no forwarding address. I went dark for a while. Just waited for the court to move. And during that time, I started thinking about something the lawyer said early on, when we were still figuring it all out. He looked at me and said, "You know, most people don't fight back. They just let it happen." That stuck with me, because I almost did. The court hearing to reverse the title transfer was scheduled for mid-February, almost 6 months after I was forced out of my home. That morning, I sat on a wooden bench outside the courthouse.
I didn't bring anyone with me.
I didn't want it to feel like a spectacle.
Just wanted it over.
Craig showed up wearing a gray suit. He looked polished, calm, like someone heading into a job interview. He didn't even glance at me. He sat with his lawyer and scrolled through his phone like this was all routine. But when the hearing started, that changed. My lawyer went first. He laid it all out: drone footage, witness statements, the forged signature, the deposition slip-up, everything. Then he showed the timeline, the night Craig stayed over, the file folder disappearing, the date the deed was mysteriously transferred. The judge asked him one question. Just one. Did the defendant ever have permission to access the plaintiff's legal documents? My lawyer said no. Then he played the clip from the drone, the moment Craig smiled at the camera. Silent, undeniable. Craig's lawyer tried to object, said it was taken without consent. The judge waved him off. Then Craig had to speak. His voice cracked when he answered questions. He tried to act like it was all a misunderstanding. Said he assumed I was giving him the property because of a conversation we supposedly had. Said he thought I wanted to leave town. My lawyer asked him to repeat that. Craig said it again, softer this time. He told me he was thinking about moving. I thought he was giving it up. I sat there, jaw clenched. The lie was so bold, so stupid, it almost didn't matter. The judge's face didn't move. The ruling came down later that week. The title transfer was void. My house was mine again. But there was no celebration. No one cheered. No one came running out of the courthouse. It wasn't over. Craig still hadn't been charged. And the house, my house, wasn't the same. The locks were changed, but it felt like a stranger had lived there. The walls were clean, but different. Like it had been scrubbed too hard. There was mail with his name, still coming through the slot. A sock left behind in the dryer. A half-used can of shaving cream in the bathroom cabinet. Even after I moved back in, I didn't unpack right away. I slept on the floor for 2 weeks. My bed felt too permanent. I didn't want to believe I was safe yet. The neighborhood never fully looked at me the same, either. Some people were kind, but others avoided eye contact. Like they didn't know who to believe. Or like they were afraid of getting involved. Ray, the woman who helped me early on, moved away that spring. Said she needed a clean break from this whole mess. I didn't blame her. Part of me wanted to do the same, but I stayed. At least for now. Because every morning I woke up, I remembered that this house almost became someone else's story. Sometimes I still find myself locking the door twice, then checking it again an hour later. It's not about fear anymore. It's about memory. About knowing that someone looked me in the eye, smiled, and stole everything I had like it was easy. And maybe what gets me the most is this. If I hadn't had that drone running that day, I don't know if anyone would have believed me.